To all of our listeners who are also fellow readers, we thought we would start off this episode by just touching on some of the books that have really been impactful to us. And oftentimes these are books that we like to share with our clients as well. So Jeremiah, you kick us off. What's a book recommendation you can make to our listeners?
Sure. I've given this away to a number of clients. It's called The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel. It's short, digestible chapters, but it walks into the psychological aspects of investing, freedom, comparison, some really great things. It kind of helps dive into how we make choices and why we make choices. And sometimes those choices have to do with thoughtful reason and math. And sometimes those choices have to do with the psychology behind money. And so it's a great book to kind of get a view of your own psyche, your own perception of money. And everyone has a money history. We talk about that a lot with clients. Whether in your house growing up, money was something that caused fights. Money was something no one ever talked about. Money was something that was very open and talked about in freedom. You carry that with you. And as you develop your own life, you find your own ways of dealing with money. And so, there's some common human threads, but there's also unique to each individual. So this book I found really helpful. Like I said, I've given it to a number of clients as they're kind of walking into the world of investing, the world of managing a new level of finances. It's very helpful.
Yep. It's a great, I think, practical application of behavioral finance, something that all of us feel and we know is true, but we oftentimes don't sit down and kind of expose our own bias or, nature, nurture, right? Our own relationship with money. So I think it's a really impactful book.
It's one of those books that it takes a lot of research stuff and brings it into a very digestible, small chapters. It doesn't feel like psychology papers, right? It feels like a very practical, useful book in bite-sized nuggets with some really good content in there. So I like it a lot.
If you're like me, you might download it on Audible. I do find that in this season of life where I find myself in the car a lot, driving carpool or dropping off kids or picking up kids or doing things around the house, I do like listening to books way more than I ever have in my life. And there was a season where I wasn't reading as much because every time I would sit down and try to read a book, well, I was too tired. I found myself asleep in just a few minutes, but I missed, right? The curiosity in me wasn't being satiated enough. So for our listeners, there are still books that I like to hold and use a highlighter and a Post-it and my pencil, right, and take notes. And then there are others that I like to listen to as well. So this one I would recommend is a listen to book. It's a classic by, well, not a traditional sense of the word classic, but it's kind of a classic business book written by Dan Sullivan. It's called Who, Not How. And the premise of the book talks about and drives towards the reader's highest and best, and to identify where your highest value is spent on a daily basis. And some of it is quantifiable. Where do you actually find the most benefit in terms of income or value from the time that you spend? And some of it is also just enjoyment. Where do you find energy in your day naturally? And using that as a guide to help you associate your highest and best. And the title, Who Not How, talks about those other tasks that burden all of our schedules that aren't aligned with our highest and best, and encourages the reader to find another who. So this may have to still be practically something that needs to get done, but who in your life, or who could you hire? Who could you delegate that to so that you can stay even more focused on your highest and best? And as business owners, I think this has been wildly impactful. I'm a part of other business groups where I get to network with other entrepreneurs, and they often comment on the benefit of this book. It's kind of been a foundational concept to many business owners. So Who Not How by Dan Sullivan, and The Psychology of Money by
Morgan Housel.
So these topics are related. We thought we'd start with some book recommendations because today we want to talk about how really smart, intelligent people still make bad financial decisions. Now, bad is relative, right? So there's my disclaimer to our listeners, is that bad to somebody may be a great decision to another person. And your plan and your financial plan is so dependent on who you are and your vision and where you're headed. But ultimately, I can't tell you, we oftentimes have conversations with people who are highly intelligent professionals and yet have made some poor financial decisions in their life. So Jeremiah, what has happened in situations like that?
Yeah, well, just to be kind of general speaking, but when markets go down investing wise, someone sees things go down, they feel like, oh no, the world is now different. Everything is going to be from here on out being down. I got to get out while I can. And so they liquidate portfolios, they empty out their 401ks, they do choices like that. And then a time later, the market's taking off again and they say, wow, we're at these new highs. Everything's going to be great from here on out. And they feel like they got to get everything back and they're going to miss out and they get money back in the market. And they just structurally sold low and bought high. And that's a good way to deteriorate wealth over time. Everyone would say, as a general classic thing, you want to buy low, you want to sell high, right? That's what you're trying to get to. But the emotions of investing, the emotions of it override very, very smart people that they just feel they can't handle it, or they're not sure where to go, or this feels like the best choice when, there's a different choice out there. So that's one that we see is just the I'm losing or I'm missing out and I can't take it anymore. And I've got to make a choice, even though I think it's a bad choice. I know it's a bad choice, but I still feel like I have to make it.
Yeah. And there can be some failure by association here. So all of our devices are tracking logarithms and cookies to feed us specific information that they feel like would be particularly tantalizing. You might find yourself in a group of friends or colleagues who are making certain investment decisions that sound extremely compelling. Or, of course, everyone wants to tell you their best story about the best outcome because they get to brag about it a little bit. But what about asking them, well, when did that investment not go well for you, right? You oftentimes don't hear those stories. So there are many extremely smart, intelligent professionals who still make investment decisions based on emotion. And albeit some of those decisions might have a place in your portfolio, but when we're talking about a long-term strategic investment strategy, we want to talk objective factors to take a look at what the strategy should be going forward as a financial advisor. So that's one area where really smart people can be easily influenced, right?
Another one I think is just as a bias that people have is they tend to buy stocks or take actions that they're familiar with. As Laura said, all my friends are doing this. It's interesting how many people will come to us. I guess a recent example would be the SpaceX IPO. That was not that long ago. We had a lot of interest of people saying, hey, this is something I think I need to be a part of. I'd like to buy this early. People who have never had discussions about participating in initial public offerings, those IPOs, people whose portfolios maybe weren't appropriate to be participating in initial public offerings, but in this moment felt that everyone they knew was doing it, and they were going to miss out if they didn't. So there's a little bit of this. It's recent. It's here. Everyone I know is doing it, and not having the time to consider, is this the right investment for me? And or is this even the right category of investments, initial public offerings, IPOs? So I'm sure there's people out there with all different feelings of how that one went, but we were surprised at how many of our clients and non-clients reached out with interest in this IPO. It was so popular that people who would not otherwise be interested in this were in that moment.
Another one that we often find could be overconfidence or blind spots. All of us have blind spots in our knowledge or because of the experience that we've had. And so when it comes to how you apply your own bias towards your financial portfolio, it could be that you are wildly successful in other areas of your life, in your profession. And so there could be an assumption or an overconfidence that bears on your decision making for either your investments, the type of investments you make, whether it be real estate or in the stock market, fixed income, private placement, the types of loans that you think are suitable, purchases and how to make the purchases, driving new capital for business growth opportunity, etc. Some of the success that individuals have experienced throughout their life can actually lead to these more fragile moments where there might be more on the line, so to speak, and they are resting on the confidence of a previous experience or some success they've had in their professional life that they are then applying to their financial portfolio. And that, unfortunately, can do a greater detriment over the long term.
I think dovetailing off of that, there's overconfidence in yourself. There's also overconfidence in the day and age we live, the gurus, the people you see on social media, the people you see, the talking heads, if you will, that are explaining certain things. And there's a current trend where people will be actual attorneys or CPAs or advisors, and they're responding to videos of somebody else giving advice, and they're kind of rating it, saying, they're kind of correct, but here's where they're wrong. And I think those are so helpful because there's so much good content out there, right? It's just some of the content is coming from a celebrity who has a big audience, and some of the content is coming from someone who really is an expert in their field, and they're trying to be helpful. And knowing the difference is very difficult. And so I like these response videos where someone says, hey, you got to do this thing and you're missing out on the boat if you don't do that. And then someone who's for example, an accountant would then respond to that. and say, oh, actually, yeah, this does exist. This is part of the tax code, but it only applies in this one situation or whatnot. They give more detail that then
Mhm.
allows people to digest, is this actually for them? Because I think we're going to live in a day and age where all these ideas, all these new thoughts can come to us so quickly, and sorting through that and not just being washed from side to side takes some doing.
Yeah. And I think in this day and age, it's not like you're going to get a little bit of information. You're going to get an overwhelming amount of information. And especially utilizing AI to our benefit each and every day and try to maximize our work life and our personal life. I invite people that we work with and clients, and even in conversation with friends of ours. Like, I think AI has some compelling things to say. I think you can facilitate AI to be a great devil's advocate if you're considering making a large decision. But I would recommend not using it as your only or your primary resource. Make sure you have other professionals in your life and experts that can criticize, ask questions of the advice that you might be receiving from AI. Because remember, AI is only as good as the information that's been fed to it. So, yeah, consider the source. And I think that can lead to a lot of that overconfidence or that blind spot. If you're asking a singular question, you're going to get a singular response. But what we find a lot of times is
Mm.
it depends, right? Because the answer to one question is oftentimes having an impact on other parts of our clients' financial portfolios. And because they're all interwoven, and that's the complexity of building out a financial plan. So, what are some other things that can be detriments to really smart people trying to make financial decisions?
I think the dynamic often between spouses, doesn't have to be spouses, could just be partners or friends even, but there's a dynamic there of wanting to give each other encouragement, but also not wanting to pull each other to task. So I'll just go to the budgeting. We see this on a regular basis that people will say, well, I spent this, and so I let the other spouse spend this because, I didn't want them to criticize what I was doing, so I just let them spend. And so in essence, both spouses are overspending because they don't want to pull each other in sort of accountability or have a harder conversation. And so we've seen situations where people are living beyond their means, not on purpose, and neither one of them really wants that. They simply have gotten to this situation by giving allowance to each other, which at the time seemed useful and helpful, but they never got that clarity. So I think living in retirement's a black box. Our spending is kind of a black box. I know we make good money. I know we have good assets. We'll figure it out later. This is what they call it, the death by a thousand razors type things. Like, it's the small things. It's not a big choice you made, but it's realizing, hey, had we been on a budget that aligned with our values, had we been investing in the things that we really cared about, wow, if we'd have done that 10 years ago, we'd be in such a different place. And I can't tell you how many people we talk to when we talk about multi-generational money. One of the big messages they want to send to the next generation is, had I started at your age, had I known this at your age, had I done this earlier? And a big piece of that really is the budgeting. And when we talk about budgeting, it's not that there's no fun there. It's just saying, does this align with your values? Are you putting your money where you believe is the most value for your life?
Hmm.
And so that's when I think where people kind of miss the boat a little bit, because they're allowing too much ambiguity and too much of a black box and
Hmm.
living into it. And they make some, in essence, poor choices by not getting that clarity.
And all of us can succumb to sneaky spending that is now on repeat and subscription order. And the lack of visibility can actually become quite expensive over the long term. And if you compare that to that capital being redeployed towards things that really matter towards you, or towards goals that you have, or to be reinvested in the market, right? What could it be doing for you versus the way that it's just kind of disappearing, right? And so a lot of times there's just this lack of visibility, and that might be happening because you are enamored with the business that you're operating and, the things that you're involved in, the intentional aspects of your life, and it could just be not really a priority. And so some of those things can kind of slip by. So to our listeners, what are the conversations that you might be avoiding that
Mm,
really would have a huge impact on your future outcome?
yeah. Well, I think as is, we talk about how do we make better choices, moving from the negative, right? How do we avoid bad choices? How do we start making better choices? I think a first step in this kind of positive direction is identifying some of your emotions, identifying, hey, I feel fearful. I feel a lack of security, or I feel I'm going to miss out on this. Identifying what is the emotion I'm feeling, just to, like you said, some clarity, naming it a little bit, and then moving into, does this fit with my larger plan? Does this align with where I'm headed? And that assumes you have a plan, right? So that'd be to step back a little bit to say, a huge way to avoid making some of these bad choices, or even a filter to run them through, is, does this fit with my existing plan? Does this fit with the vision that we're building for our lives? Man, that will deal with a lot of these fear-driven or comparison-driven or lack of clarity-driven bad choices. If you have a plan and you're measuring these things, does this align with the future I'm trying to build?
Mhm.
So I think there's a first piece there of identifying the emotion and then filtering it through. Does this match kind of my plan?
Yeah. Do you have a plan? Do you have a professional? Do you have a thought partner in your life that can come alongside you and not just hold you accountable to your plan, but be helpful in moments of key decisions to be made? And, going back to the book recommendation that I started the podcast with, are you ready to hire a who? And a lot of times that's predicated on you identifying your highest and best. Where's the best place for you to spend your time, because it gives you energy and you earn your maximum income from the time spent there? And what are the other things that you're ready to hire a who? And at certain junctures in life, it might seem like a greater risk. I'm not ready to spend this money. And you have to do a little bit of cost benefit analysis there. What is it costing you by maintaining certain responsibilities or tasks that are really not aligned with your highest and best? We find the most successful relationships that we have are with those who are wildly successful in their careers, but they're ready to hire a who, for someone to take a look and quarterback their entire holistic financial plan that includes more than just their investment portfolio, and also to come alongside to be a thought partner during life's twists and turns. So to our listeners, that might resonate. Is this a time in your life where you're ready to hire someone to help you build that financial plan?
These books, we're big readers. I'm sure we'll bring more books to the podcast, to the discussion of ones that are good. If people have books that you like, we'd love to hear about them. We're always looking for new book recommendations. People are listening to say, hey, I really got a lot of value out of this book. And for us, we read a lot in the business space, the finance space. And of course, we have personal things we read, but those types of books I think are so helpful, helping people think beyond themselves, think beyond where they're at. And even that, the input you're receiving, I think is really helpful. Help people craft a vision for their life that's beyond just what's right in front of them.
Yep, absolutely. Another piece of good influence. So to all of our listeners, we hope this has been helpful. Thank you so much. A few more things to let you know about before we go. Podcast reviews really help us to serve more people and get this information into the hands of the people who need it. Please leave us a review. Even if it's not 5 stars, we welcome the feedback.
And we invite you to let us know what topics you would like to hear more about, or what would benefit the people in your life who you're closest to. We have more resources online. Those resources are designed to help you share this great information easily with people in your life. To access those resources, please visit trichordadvisors.com.
Often we hear from clients that they wish they had talked to us sooner. If that's you, we'd be thrilled to see how financial planning can benefit your life. Email us at contact@trichordadvisors.com, or simply click on the link in the show notes.
We love creating content that's useful, resourceful, and maybe even a little entertaining. We want to make this mega universe of financial topics and advice applicable and helpful to your life.
Remember, at Trichord Advisors, we are your future's best ally.